evening and welcome to the November 2nd meeting of the Dover-Sherborn Regional School Committee. My name is Maggie Sharon. I call this meeting to order at 5:31 p.m. This open meeting is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12th, 2020. Information about how to join remote school committee meetings and meeting agendas is posted on the Dover-Sherborn District website. Please note that this meeting is being recorded. Be aware that anything that you broadcast can be captured or will be captured by the recording. We're going to begin tonight with community comments. And so community comments are an opportunity for members of the community to be heard. We respectfully request that you make your comments brief and that you move the discussion forward by adding new information. We ask you to try avoid repeating points that have already been made. For community comments, please virtually raise your hand and wait to be called on. When you speak, begin by stating your name and your address, whether or not you live in Dover or Sherborn or Boston. Community comments are an opportunity for the school committee to listen to members of the community. It's not a forum for us to answer questions or engage in a debate. Once the public comment section of the meeting has been concluded, we will move on to other business, and unsolicited comments from the community will no longer be permitted. This is standard operating procedure in our school committee meetings across our 3 school districts. And since we do need to wrap the meeting up in 1 hour, I'm going to ask that we limit the community comments to no more than 15 minutes. So just if you are going to make a community comment, I will be watching the time. So thank you for your understanding so that we have time to get through this tonight. Do I have anyone in the audience? So I'm going to ask also if you could just mute yourselves right now, because there are folks who are not muted and we're getting some feedback on my end anyway. But if you would like to participate in community comments, and you could please raise your hand either by turning on your screen and raising your hand, or by using the hand raising feature of the Zoom. That would be great at this time. Going once. Going twice. Okay. So hearing no community comments, I'm going to ask, we're going to start with our agenda items, and the agenda was posted on the website. We're going to begin with updates from the our school administration. And before we do, I do just want to say briefly that tomorrow is election day. I want to say a huge thank you to our town clerks, Jacqueline Morris and Felicia Hoffman, for all the work that they did over the last few weeks to make it possible for so many citizens to get out and vote either early or to vote by mail, and for all the work that they will be doing tomorrow. I want to thank all of our educators for the work that they've done leading up to this day to teach our students about their civic responsibility and the value of this right. And I just specifically want to say a big congratulations to all the Dover and Sherborn students who are voting for the first time in tomorrow's presidential election. That includes some of our seniors, it includes probably a couple juniors, and certainly a lot of college freshmen, some of whom are sort of unwilling, still living at homers, who've been really excited to either go to the polls in person tomorrow or to do their mail-in ballot. And I've been able to see a couple of folks do that, and it's been really, really exciting. So thank you to the schools and all of the teachers for all the work that you've done over the years to get our new voters ready to go tomorrow and this week. And thank you to everybody. It's a really big deal in this community, and we do voting really well, and it's awesome. All right, without further ado, I believe the first person up is Mrs. McCoy, correct?
Yes, thank you. May I share my screen? Is that okay?
Of course.
Great, thank you. All right, can everybody see that? Okay, so I was asked to share some of the survey feedback that we received from educators, families, and students as to how the remote and hybrid learning model is going so far to date. I will say that this information was gathered right after our 4th week of learning, and we're now beginning our 8th week of learning. So it's a bit outdated, but it will give you a flavor of where we were and explain a little bit of why we've been shifting the way we have. Just a reminder that we had set out specific goals for our 4th rendition of remote learning, and many of the questions that we asked educators, families, and students were around these goals to see if we were in fact reaching them. We'll start with the educator survey. We asked what was most beneficial to them over the summer during the first 10 days before the students joined us, and then where we need to go from now. It's clear that the collaboration time that they had together to share ideas, to work on curriculum, to troubleshoot technology, to practice the protocols that were going to be in place was just critical to their success. So many thanks to the school committee for allowing them those 10 days and all of the support for the summer professional development opportunities that we provided. Moving forward, they're asking for more time for reflection on their own practice and for sharing of best practices across educators. They want to look at more assessment tools so that they can gauge how students are doing, and then have time to go back and try some more apps that they haven't yet had a chance to try. Okay, so in terms of who participated, from the middle school educators, we had 41. From the high school, we had 47. Out of a scale of 5, you'll see their connection with students was a 3.5 out of 5 and a 3.4. Feeling of safety, both schools had a 3.2. Access to technology, again, this was 3 weeks ago. You'll see that we were still in the process of getting teachers the technology they needed. So here we've listed a lot of the things that we've done to date. Lucan, who's a new member of our IT department, did an incredible job creating a video on kind of best practices for live streaming that we've learned over time. We've gotten faculty more cameras, microphones, speakers, so that they could live stream to the students at home who could have a better experience. Additional apps, reimbursement for any cords and things that they purchase themselves. So there's been a lot of work around technology, and I'm eager to get our next round of results to see what else teachers might need. Other themes from teachers, the schedule seems to be working, but of course nothing replaces in-person traditional schedules. So hopefully that day will come soon. They feel that the students are more engaged from the spring, that they have better tools and training to provide learning opportunities, and that the grading piece is key because they feel that students are being held accountable and therefore more engaged. In terms of strategies in general, they're finding that giving students breaks, opportunities to collaborate, use of the breakout rooms and the chat features, anything outdoors, and of course office hours are really helping in this learning environment. And they've highlighted Near Deck, Jamboard, Padlet, and GoFormative as their favorite apps so far. Challenges are time management and work-life balance. You'll see the quote from one of our teachers, "I feel like I'm reinventing the wheel every day." They are having to change their instructional practices, look at their curriculum differently. So as many teachers have said, they feel like they're a first-year teacher all over again, where you're literally one day ahead of the kids. That there's been a ton of meetings has been a challenge. Deadlines for other things that come up, such as grades, is one added thing to a teacher's week, and Zoom fatigue, which we can all relate to for sure. So what have we done so far, or what's in the making? More opportunities for teachers to collaborate and share. We're making sure that they're using the state's prioritized standards so that they know where to invest their energy in content. The goals for the evaluation process, we pre-wrote them if they could use them if they'd like. Reducing administrative duties, extending deadlines, trying to pare down meetings, updating the weekly plan that they're giving to students because they found it too cumbersome. Kate McCarthy is providing opportunities for teachers to support their own mental and social well-being. And obviously we are relying heavily on our parent organizations to help boost morale wherever possible. Switching to the family survey, at the middle school level, we had 328 respondents. At the high school level, 189. You can go back through this data at a later time. Again, student connectedness is the lower of the ratings here, and that's for obvious reasons. The good news is that we're seeing students be more independent, feeling safe, and having some more consistency in their education. The quote on the side just talks about how parents, and this is a general feeling, have seen a huge change since the spring, and they're grateful for the teachers and their learning. So from the spring, they're seeing greater organization and consistency, an increase in synchronous learning, new curriculum, high expectations, all great, all related to our goals. Next steps. Families asked that we revisit the way that we are using our Wednesdays and add some structure to them, which I know both middle and high school have been looking at, to consider the time that students are spending on screen and perhaps find opportunities and ways for them to learn off screen. And obviously we're hearing this K through 12, the more that we can get students in person for learning, the better. And students, of course, the most important voice in all of this. We had 285 middle school students respond. 260 of them were hybrid. So in terms of connection to their peers, you'll see that the average middle school student who is a hybrid student rated it 3.4 out of 5, and the remote students 2.5. So obvious reasons for the difference there. And we'll continue to try to figure out how to bridge that gap and make our remote students feel more connected. Connection to teachers, hybrid students was 3.4 and remote was 3.2. So that's good news. There isn't much of a difference there. So hopefully the opportunity to interact with teachers online has been positive. What do middle school teachers or students want us to know about different kinds of learning? Big takeaways, opportunities to talk and interact with peers is huge. It says, you know, it's breaking their isolation, and that's what they're really desiring. When teachers share their screens, it's helpful. And obviously having breaks in person and online is key. High school, we had 184 respondents. Only 11 of them were our remote students, but their connection to peers, again, a difference between hybrid average of 3.3 and remote average of 2.8, and we will continue to look at that. Takeaways from high school students. Again, they love group work as long as there are breaks for them to also do some independent work. They do not want to be online for 80 minutes doing group work, and luckily they're not for the most part. Movement breaks are key in person and online. Looking at screen time and trying to reduce that as much as possible. And in terms of our remote students, they're saying that when teachers share their screens, when things are posted on Google Classroom and available online, and when they are stationed near the front of the classroom, they have the best experience. Then here's the million-dollar question. How many students would like to return to the middle and high school for more than 2 days? And the results are here. The resounding answer is yes, please. We would love to come to school more than 2 days a week, with the caveat, please don't take our Wednesdays away. They seem to really enjoy their Wednesdays as non-screen time, time outside, project-based learning, office hours, time to connect with peers. So that's that. And I will stop sharing my screen. I'm happy to take any questions. I'll share this slide deck with you, and I'm happy to take follow-up questions on email or at the next meeting as well. Mr. Jaffe?
Huge thank you for pulling that data together and making it so accessible and so understandable to us. I know folks have a couple questions, and I saw Michael's hand up. You gotta unmute. Michael, did you have a question?
Sorry, got it. Sorry. Thank you, Beth, for the really great summary of the survey. It seems that we're kind of in the red with connections, or maybe deep in the red with connections, which I'm sure has you concerned, has me concerned. I think should have all of us concerned. It seems that potentially, if there is it seems like both at the middle school and high school, a desire to have more structure, perhaps more substance on Wednesdays, that maybe there is an opportunity to try to build Wednesdays around connections and to maximize those connections for both hybrid and remote students. Is that possible?
I think so. I would let Mr. Kellett and Mr. Smith weigh in as well. I know that Kate McCarthy and her clinical team are launching the SEL survey, which will give us more specific data about individual kids, whereas this was kind of, superficial across the board. And they'll be analyzing that data to figure out, obviously all kids need more connection, but which ones need it the most, and coming up with kind of a tiered process for providing that. But I don't want to speak for our principals, but I would think that Wednesday between X block and their check-in times with teachers would be a great opportunity for kids to connect.
Yeah, Scott wanted to weigh in, and then I see Anne has her hand up as well.
Yeah, the middle school, we're looking at that both at the team level, grade level, and our teams are aware, both getting the students, trying to find some way to get them to be able to engage more across team, because there's very little of that besides what they do on their own outside of school. So they are strategizing on what we might be able to do for that. At the moment, we don't have a solution, but it is on our minds, and it's on our plate to try to come up with something. Same thing with staff. We have staff they're separated right now. They come in with their cohort, but there's, besides an occasional Zoom, there's little interaction between the hot teams and the cold teams. So that's another thing that we're looking at as well, because they're not going to be able to do their job as well if they can't interact with their peers. And if we can do that, that will feed into the work we can do with the kids as well.
Great, thanks. John, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, obviously our setup's a tad different in that we've got like all of our seniors in, all of our juniors in, freshmen, sophomores. And between our break and the long passing and then a 45-minute lunch, I will say kids are able to really connect with their friends within the grade, and albeit we're a small school, so kids certainly have friends across grades. And so that has become more challenging. In terms of the teacher part, I don't disagree. One of the challenges we have is Wednesdays are our only extra help day. So it's pretty important that we build time for that for academic purposes. And the beginning of our day, we also have scheduled band and chorus at that time. So we are looking at ways. We have a faculty meeting this coming Wednesday in which I'll be sharing the most recent student survey feedback, because the faculty hasn't seen this yet. And it'll be a good way for us to, brainstorm some ideas. I don't know what the possibilities are, but I'd like to get to a point where maybe we readdress the MOU and talk about being able to have teachers stay after school for extra help and have, but that's going to then require probably a greater cross-pollination of people. But we're definitely open to that.
Thanks. Anne, you had a question.
Thank you, Beth, for that. That was actually really, really informative. There's been talk, thank you, Scott and John, too, you answered part of my question, but the other part is we've got the student-student interaction and the teacher-teacher interaction, but how about for student-teacher interaction, increasing that? Because I know for some students, they learn better if they feel comfortable with the teachers. And I don't know if there was a feeling that we got at that, or if that's something we can get at to sort of see if there are students who need more support or more time to form those relationships with their teachers in order to learn to the best of their abilities. Thanks.
So in the survey data I showed you, it was student to student interaction, and it was actually student to teacher interaction. In the quantitative data, what Scott was referring to is some of the comments that teachers made in the kind of the open forum on the survey as to the fact that they miss working with their peers and seeing their peers in person. But either way, we know that some of our kids feel more connected to adults than others. And so certainly, getting at a deeper level, that will be important.
I think John touched on it with the after school extra help. That was always a big part in those student teacher relations. It provides them with time in much smaller groups where they can just personalize things. So I think that would be invaluable, but given numbers and constraints, it's difficult.
Yeah, I'm curious. I mean, I'll leave it up to you guys as you negotiate the MOU, but I'm curious, whether they offer in-person help in person or by opening up a Zoom and making themselves available. It would seem to me that, the agreements in terms of the impact bargaining wouldn't supersede other parts of the teacher association contract. And if they include offering extra help, maybe it's offered virtually, to stop with the pollination. I don't know, but I leave it to greater minds than mine to sort out.
Well, just Maggie, just so that you know, if I may, so, and Scott can certainly speak for the middle school. So every block does have an extra help time on Wednesdays. Could we use more? Absolutely.
Yeah.
But we do have set times that are 30 minutes each in which the teachers are required to keep their Zoom on for the entire time. And that's something that students can pop into those things. And we also made some adjustments based on some recent parent guardian feedback where I'm requesting teachers inviting certain kids who are academically having some struggles with that. And that obviously didn't make me a real popular person, but I don't want to see what took place last spring with some kids really kind of falling off the radar, and we just can't have that happen with this hybrid system. So we've also required students to attend those Wednesday sessions. One of the silver linings, I guess, of remote is the fact that the teacher doesn't have a mask on and the student does either. Because I will tell you, and Maggie, as an educator, that's been a real challenge. It's been a challenge for me. When I'm addressing kids and I have a mask on, if it's an upperclassman that I've known for a while, that's fine. This has probably been the most challenging year trying to learn more about the freshmen than any other year since I've been at DS.
Same. I feel you. It's absolutely true. It helps me when they wear the same cool mask every day, but all right. If we're okay to move on, I want to I'm staying cognizant of time. Oh, Lynn, yeah, sorry. You sure?
I was going to ask how the Wi-Fi is working. I know that was the bane of Olivia's existence, so I imagine with all the technology that we're using now, how is that?
The IT department has done a really, really excellent job of getting additional spots in various locations that had the Wi-Fi was limited. But they've really, they identified those areas and they've put in new, I don't even know what the right term is, but they put in more access.
Access points, yep.
That's called access points.
Access point, thank you.
And Lynn, at the high school, both the students and the teachers report that the technology is much more consistent. It's much more robust. Like anything else with so many people using it, we do have our occasional glitches, but those are far and few between. And we also have a new tech who's been working with the high school and middle school staff this year named Lucan, who is absolutely fantastic. He has been great, not only with helping problem solve student issues, but also really coming up with creative ways in which our teachers can deliver that. And I can't thank him enough for what he's done to help put us in a good position.
Absolutely.
Great. Huge thank you to all the IT department, literally the essential workers of any school attempting to have learning right now is our thank you. You are all angels. All right, Dr. Keough, I think you're next.
Yes, I couldn't agree more, by the way. Our IT folks have really stepped up. Lucan has done a great job. He has a unique style and a way of kind of reaching people where they are and I think soothing their anxieties. And that's huge in this time. The other thing that's important to remember is that, as we were discussing earlier before the meeting started, Zoom is under incredible pressure. The amount of use, just imagine how much use is going on. And I've been noticing sometimes on our Monday morning Zooms, I'll get the signal that the internet is unstable. And then today it was perfect. So I asked Anthony, who happened to be in that Zoom, Anthony Ritacco, and he believes that Zoom is having some of these problems too. So it's not always just straight up the wireless. Now that said, Lynn, we did have some serious wireless issues in the past few years, and Anthony got on it fast. And what he did was he put those hubs outside of anywhere where there were issues, and it seems to have resolved. Considering how much we use it. So. Okay, so as far as my report goes, I don't have a lot of new information. You received the updated guidelines that the Board of Health both approved today. Basically, I really don't want to reiterate unless you want me to. I'd rather answer questions. Basically, they gave themselves some flexibility now so that it doesn't have to be hard and fast, 2 weeks in or yellow or 2 weeks of red in order to swivel. So that was one of the really, really important pieces, because when you look at the numbers of people who are sick with coronavirus and make decisions to shut down one of our programs, like K3 or 4-5 or middle school, in terms of bringing people back. If we were to shut it down just for that, and it turns out those numbers were really not even within the schools, that's something that they want to be able to respond to. So I think what they've come up with is very good. They, I think, are attempting to keep the administration's role out of, or stay out of our, I guess, stay in each other's lane, out of each other's lanes, I should say. Can't think of a good way to put it. They want to be sure that they're not trying to run the school administration, and we're not making big decisions about health questions, public health questions. And so that's why we separated out the timeline and the stages. But of course, I'm consulting with those guys weekly, and they have a standing meeting to which I'm going pretty regularly, and I feel like we're in a good place. As I mentioned, is our biggest issue is logistics, and it is not a deal breaker, but it's big.
Thank you, Dr. Keough. Do I have questions from members of the school committee? Comments? Okay. Thank you. I really appreciate the update. I appreciate having the flexibility to sort of look at the data with nuance. I've spoken to many of my relatives who were very concerned, Dover's in the red, and when you're a super small town, that can be one family, and that's serious and that's important, and each person's health is obviously important, and yet it's not the same thing as a city going from gray to red. So I very much appreciate all the professionals who are working on this dilemma on our behalf, and certainly thinking about what can we do to maximize learning and also to be consistent. I think that one thing that I hear frequently from community members, from parents, is the private schools are in more, and what I've seen in the months that this plays out is that they did start in more, and in fact they often cancel school with 24 hours notice. Tomorrow, guys, it's going to be a remote day, and next week it's going to be a remote day. And one thing I really appreciated is our commitment to be as consistent as possible, that once we add, we're trying to keep it going. And I feel like for our families and for our community and our teachers, consistency and predictability is important, even though we know we're working against a situation that's not very predictable. So thank you guys for your commitment to be thoughtful and reflective, and do all this with a lot of care and respect for all of the community, and also for all the folks who work in the community as well. Thank you.
Well, Maggie, it's a tip of the hat also to our staff and to our teaching and learning subcommittee this summer, who along the lines made the decision that the remote days would be live streaming instruction, which I think has made all the difference in the world. Because in some systems, the kids are in for 2 days and then they're working on their own, the other 3 completely on their own. And from what I'm hearing, that has not gone well in other systems. So that's a credit to Beth and her crew that put that whole, and John and Scott, all the folks who put that together this summer.
Yeah. we're able to provide a much more interactive and responsive experience than most of our neighbors. And you know, like that's a function of the work of all of these folks, and also, you know, a commitment in the community to having reasonable class sizes over a long period of time. You can't provide social distancing if you have a class of 28 kids in a kindergarten or whatever. So thank you very, very much to all the taxpayers and the people who made decisions along the way that have led us to be able to do this. Our next item on the agenda is updates from our principals. I know we got really detailed and thoughtful updates in the packets. Do you want to highlight a couple of things, or you know, what would you like to present? They're really, really thoughtful. I'm so impressed with the things that are going on. Thank you for doing those reports. I know they're a lot of work. And we'll start with Scott.
Sure. A bunch of the stuff that I was going to touch on, we talked about earlier in Beth's report. The one thing I just wanted to make sure everybody's aware, we do have our WIN groups going. Those are groups of like 6 to 8 folks, and not to start trouble, but the best WIN group in the building is mine. And actually, one of the advantages that I have is I'm there all 4 days. So one of my meetings with the students is in person. So that's a huge, huge plus. And we've been going outside. Last Friday, we went to the gym because there was no one in there during H block. So it worked out well. But I think that's going very well. Another quick thing is John mentioned band and chorus. 8th grade and high school are meeting Wednesdays mornings, and then our 6th and 7th grade is meeting after that. But we had 2 very excited little children last week in Jeff Herman and Janice Berry, who came to the realization that they are going to be able to meet with their students in person, and following the guidelines from the state and Department of Health, they're going to have in-person music, which is just fantastic. Our schedule is, you know, we have an advantage over the high school in that our schedule is built where our H block meets on Tuesday and Friday, the last period of the day. And what they're going to do is pull smaller groups so they can have some in-person lessons there and still maintain this appropriate distancing. So they were like kids in a candy store. It was so awesome to see. I see John nodding. It's like it's unbelievable. So that's very exciting. We just put out another survey to our students and staff, and just a quick look at it. We did it at the end of the week. We already had 300 students respond, and it is overwhelmingly positive about the in-person days. I mean, that is a huge, huge thing to them. We'd love it to be more, but we realize that, you know, with what's going on, it's just not possible right now. But they're very grateful for that, as we are grateful to have them in. So I will let John, unless there are any questions, let John give you a few highlights.
John.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Sharon and members of the Regional School Committee. Just a couple of things I wanted to point out. I did want to, and you saw it in my reflections piece, I did want to congratulate the most recent number of inductees to the National Honor Society. I give these young men and women an awful lot of credit. A lot of them had to do some really creative things this past spring and summer. And obviously it's a culmination of all of their work, but some of this work had to be done during a time of COVID and isolation. And so the kids really deserve a lot of credit for that. I want to thank Ms. Andrews and Ms. Malad for really putting on really a nice virtual ceremony. You know, we're learning how to integrate and enhance those. And the neat thing, so we couldn't necessarily have a speaker, but what they did, which was really, I thought really, really cool, is they talked about some of the projects that some of the kids engaged in as part of their community service. So as a way to sort of like a little insight into what some of these kids were doing as part of their process to be considered for a National Honor Society. So that was fantastic. You know, and that being said, you know, I think something that We know that we would love to be able to be in more days. We certainly wish we didn't have a pandemic, and we know that what the in-person school experience brings. But that being said, we still have been able to conduct our SATs, our PSATs. We conducted our National Honor Society induction. We held our class elections. We have our virtual clubs, our meeting. We probably have about 35 clubs at our meeting. It's not the same as in person, but I will tell you that I had an opportunity to pop in briefly to women's group, and Ms. McGovern and Ms. Andrews were running it, and the kids were fantastic, and they were just really thrilled to be talking about important issues. We have been able to have in-person play auditions and rehearsals, which is so critical for the drama program. And as Scott said, our in-person band and chorus, you know, I think you folks know this, Janice and Jeff are absolute gems. They are incredibly strong advocates for the program. And they make sure that they keep Scott and I on our toes at all times. But you know what? I admire that about them, and I appreciate that about them, because that's the type of passion that we want in our teachers. So they should really be congratulated for, you know, looking at ways to do creative things, and then finally having that reward of being able to bring kids together. And then next week, I know, Scott, I think this week you did them, but next week we're going to be conducting our school pictures. So despite all of these challenges, we're still doing a lot of the things that are kind of part of who we are and what we do. A lot of thanks to Don Fattori for setting up really whatever it is that we need, whether it's, you know, additional space, setting things up, having the right air quality systems in place. It has enabled us, I think, to really, for now, do the 2-day in school really well. So, you know, and I think that if we can continue to make progress, terrific. But just know that a lot of people are working very hard, and that includes the kids, at making the 2-day in school work really well. And I'll just finally just say that, you know, we have some social distancing things here and there. Sometimes at lunch, you know, we're constantly telling them to separate and this and that. But in terms of mask compliance and all of those things, the kids have been fantastic. And we are fortunate in this community, because I'm sure that's not the case in every community. And trust me, it makes our lives a lot easier when we can focus on other things instead of reminding 20 to 30 kids a day to wear their mask. Our kids get it. They understand it. They understand that it is an important step in keeping everybody safe, and hopefully an important step in getting kids back to school even more at some point. So I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you so much for your report, Mr. Smith. You know, I think it's all the things that are going on, and also the kids being able to get on board with the compliance with the masks and so forth is really a testament to a lot of kids who have learned the value of going to school. So thank you for all of that. Questions from members? Yeah, Kate.
More just 2 quick comments that really apply to middle and high school. I was really appreciative that the teachers put out virtual back to school night videos. You know, I've met some of my kids' teachers before, because I have 3 kids now, and but it was just really nice to be able to watch those and feel a little bit like we had a peek into the classroom. And I'm also really so happy about music and drama. I know, and band, that a lot of people worked really hard on that. So thank you to everyone.
Yes. Yes, everything that Kate said. Yeah.
Ms. Sharon, if I can just point out one more thing.
Yeah.
Thank you to Emily Sullivan for 3 successful weeks of athletics as well.
Absolutely.
And that has been, you know, fantastic too, including her and Chris Hendricks and members of the girls varsity soccer team who were shoveling the turf this Sunday.
Yes, thank you. Because, you know, a snowstorm in October is absolutely what we need.
Yeah.
Moving on, we have the warrant report. Dawn, is there something that we need to say about that, or just acknowledge that it's in our packet?
Just acknowledge that it's in the packet, and if you want to stop by, we've got a lot for you to sign.
Great. Okay. just in terms of, we're going to go now to Dawn for our monthly report. A detailed report is in the packet, so if you've had a chance to read it, I have to, as always, say thank you, because I always start with questions and then I read your report, and generally speaking, you answer all of them. So
That is my goal. And what I've been trying to do is keep the information rolling. So you'll notice that it feels pretty repetitive in the revenue world because nothing has changed since the last report, but by leaving it there, at least allows you to refresh your memory as to what's happening. I will point out in the operating expenditures for salaries, now that we have encumbered almost all the positions, I will put in the report that we're seeing a positive variance in the teacher classroom line item, and that's representing payroll savings from a couple positions that are on leave of absence. Both those right now, going into fiscal year 22, won't be savings that will roll in because they're leave of absence, but it will be a savings this year for us for bottom line purposes. And I think that's it. I just reminded you that the substitute and the custodial overtime expenses obviously are expensed as incurred. So those are some of the two big numbers sitting out there in the unbudgeted, along with the coaches' salaries for winter and spring. On expenditures, you now see sort of encumbrances for healthcare. And I think we finally found that magic spot. I don't have a huge healthcare savings for you this year. So that could be good or bad. We've, I think, gotten our formula correct, but what it will mean is that we probably will see a little bit more of an increase when we start building the fiscal year 22 budget, because I don't have that savings that will roll forward with us. But in a way, it makes my job a little easier, not have to manage huge positive variances. So I was very pleasantly surprised that I didn't end up with a big number there. You'll notice that the retiree encumbrance includes $100,000 that we plan to contribute to the OPEB, and then there's a little bit of a positive variance right now. Our goal is to take that positive variance and contribute that also to the OPEB. So we'll keep monitoring that also, but that's sort of our plan, is any savings that we have in that line item would then be contributed to your OPEB fund. Other than that, I think the last thing we need to really look at to encumber is utilities. So we'll try to have that done for you when we present the budget in December. I try to provide for you, well, actually, I'll stop there. Any questions on the financial statement? Okay.
From members? No, okay.
So I tried to provide,
I'm having an unstable connection.
Yeah, you're freezing a little bit. I think I provided a synopsis of how we are handling the reopening grant to date. Trying to give you enough information and some direct items so that you can put some perspective on that. So we're continuing to manage, what we haven't spent so far, and trying to, obviously make use of every penny that we have, but you can sort of see where we've spent it to date. We do have to file our first, even though the grant ends in December, we have to file an interim report next week. So I find that sort of interesting, but we'll be doing that as of 9/30. That's due next week. And we will let you know, obviously, where we end up with that, because it will be ending soon. I've also included for you your quarterly report for your special revenue and revolving funds, and added some notes to the side to give you some more insight. You'll notice that the cafeteria is looking pretty depleted right now. So we did add a note there to know that the federal reimbursement for the lunches, so as we know, no students are paying for lunches this year, just the a la carte. That revenue is delayed coming in. So hopefully we'll see a larger influx of funds versus the exiting of funds once they get that program up and running for reimbursement. We actually just put our application in 2 weeks ago. So this will be a little bit of a slowed cycle, but obviously it will go all the way back to September. So we will be able to, gain back that revenue. So I just want to make sure you don't think that that's running into the red. And then fiscal year 22 budget. So get ready. That'll be the next time we meet. It's hard to believe, but it'll get delivered to you on the Friday before that, the notebooks. So if anyone has a notebook they'd like to reuse, we're encouraging people to drop it off to Tricia at your convenience. And then it's a good way to make Andrew's sustainability committee happy, but it also saves us from reprinting all the tabs and everything. So if you have those sitting around, feel free to drop them off, and Tricia will take inventory of what we have and then order whatever new we have. So believe it or not, it's getting ready.
Oh, I believe it. Thank you for specifically the things that we're doing to get more close to the budget, especially with regard to healthcare. And I know there have been so many unexpected and sort of unpredictable expenses this year with all the uncertainty. And I know it's been a request from our partners in advisory and warrant that we get like a little closer with our budgeting. And, you know, I know Ms. Matarazzo's here, and I don't know who's our person from Dover, but I appreciate the moving closer to like actual, and also I appreciate that's super hard to do in this environment. So thank you. Questions from members? Okay. Thank you for the very, very complete, specific things that prevent us from asking millions of questions. All right. I know we have our first read of the program of studies. John, thank you for providing the update. I see that there's not that many changes. You know, do you have anything you wanted to say to just frame it, or we're gonna just take a couple questions?
Yeah, just going to frame it real quick. So the first part in the memo that was included in your packet to Dr. Keough from myself talked about modifying some of our elective courses to include them in the GPA. And we had a academic standards conversation today, and we'll continue to do so. And we'll also be involving our school council. So this is not a proposal that will end up being implemented for this school year. We really feel like we've got to put some additional time into this discussion. And then we also kind of need to have a discussion about GPA and weighted and unweighted. And it's a much bigger discussion. We had a great discussion today, but we learned that we really need to give this some more time and not rush this through to bring to your attention when we may have other options that may be the better option for our students.
Okay.
So the only additions would be the COVID language that would go into the program of studies, and that is what we would be sending to colleges and universities. That just helps explain the way our grading worked out this past spring and this current year.
Okay. I know we have a couple questions from members. Michael?
Yeah, thank you, Maggie. Thank you, John. I know I spoke a little bit around this time last year around, John, what you've alluded to giving more thought, but I wanted to share a few thoughts. I do overall like the idea of adding some art, technology, and music honors courses to the list of courses that are included in a student's GPA. But it seems to me that the DS practice of excluding some courses from a student's GPA calculation sends a strong signal that some courses count more than others, or some courses count and others don't count.
Right.
I have a similar view about GPA bonus points for AP and honors classes, and the what Dr. Keough refers to as the sorting hat dynamic that results in increased difficulty for CP students seeking to enter AP or honors classes to get to that level versus a similarly situated honors student. I'm concerned about the messaging that this gives to our students about what classes are important and how this can affect a student's choices of course selection and also their self-esteem. I also think that the existing DS GPA grading and leveling policies seem inconsistent with our commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I am happy to hear that these are going to be looked at more fulsomely. And I hope in that process, we're looking at unintended adverse consequences of some of these policies. Thanks.
I would agree, Mr. Jaffe. Thank you.
Thanks. Yep, Lynn?
Well, and that kind of segues into my question / comment. Is there a plan to have, in light of the development of the equity task force, diversity initiatives, is there a plan to have this program of studies be reviewed for, implications on equity for?
Oh, absolutely. Implicit bias. Absolutely. Yes. Yes.
That should definitely be part of what comes out of the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Task Force, Lynn.
Yeah.
In fact, I would hope that one of the subcommittees hones in on, I think, I get confused between that one and the Sustainability Task Force, but I believe that we are going to have a category that looks at kind of the culture of how we do business. And to me, this falls right into that category. And I think that John and his team are rightfully acknowledging that this is an issue. And Michael, you're absolutely right. I mean, I think we have to, this is something to grapple with.
Yeah.
This is a really big challenge, and it's something that I spent a ton of time trying to tackle as a principal in Wellesley. And we never did go forward, but there was talk of unweighting the GPA, and we had big discussion and analysis of it, and it was all about equity. That's what drove it. That was the whole point. And yes, there are practices that we have in place that will be reviewed as part of the work of the diversity, equity, and inclusion groups. And I know we're lucky to have John at the helm, because I think he will be amenable to those conversations.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions before we move on with the agenda? I echo the sentiments of Michael and with Lynn with regard to the difficult questions that you guys are all grappling with. Thank you. Thank you for taking these on. They're hard. All right, moving forward, we're going to look at the ACID recommendations for fiscal year 22. And I believe this is something that we need to take a vote on, correct, Andrew?
Yes. So basically, we have a timeline that's set in the contract in order for it to be completed prior to your budget discussions. And so this is what we're talking about here are the extra compensatory duties. And we have a committee made up of administrators and educators representing the DSEA. And there's a process of people bringing things forward to their principals for consideration. And then ultimately they come to the ACED, or they also go to the athletics committee if it's athletics related, but they eventually come to the ACED for the decision making. And ultimately, however, because there are budget ramifications, you really have the final say.
Okay.
And so the document that I gave you in the packet, this year we had one request that impacts the region, and that was to raise the ratio of the cross-country coaches from a 4.0 to a 5.5. You can see the current ratios costing us $6,000 per coach. We have 2 head coaches, 2 varsity coaches on cross country. This would bump them to $8,300. And so the total increase for the 2 coaching positions that would have to be included in the budget would be $4,533. We had what I would consider to be a pretty healthy discussion about this. And I'm watching the time, so I don't want to get too deep into it. But I can tell you, we did look. These were looked at in the Appendix C group a few years ago, the ratios. So I struggled a little bit with this one, but the feeling of the committee was that it should be moved forward.
Okay. So here's how we're going to do it. I'm going to make a motion, invite a motion on the table, and then we're going to pause for discussion, have an opportunity for folks to discuss. Before I do that, are there any clarifying questions, just like stuff you need more information about? Not like, yeah, Lynn.
I don't know if this should be part of the discussion once the motion is made, but what's the rationale for the increase? Like, is it like a market issue? Is it, is this trying to get, what's the rationale?
I think the problem is, Lynn, we have varied pay structures for our different coaches. And so that's what makes it tricky, right? Why should football be paid at this rate and basketball with only 12 kids be paid at this rate and lacrosse with this many kids? It gets really complicated. I think that the argument from the cross-country coaches is that we get a lot of bang for the buck, that it reaches many, many, many students, over 100 students, whereas some of our other sports don't. That, believe me, was part of the analysis that, frankly, it was Dana White and Brian McLaughlin were the two representatives who hashed this out. And they went through 10 different towns, at least, our like communities, to see what were you on that subcommittee, Ann? Or you were?
I was,
Yeah, so
yep.
you remember, there was a pretty deep dive into this. And that's why, what I was arguing was that when we start to tweak that, then naturally anyone else who's in a 4.0 is going to want to tweak it too. And I felt like I wasn't sure this was the time to do it.
Well, that's why I asked like how it compares to market, because we're not the only town that has a cross-country coach. So I would assume that we could sort of look at comparators and see what they should be.
But we also
I think we're always in the hunt.
But we also have a much larger team than many communities. We race against schools that have like 5 kids in their teams.
Yeah, our teams are 3 to 4 times larger than any other school, with the exception, I think, of maybe Westwood. Lynn, I saw it as an equity issue, frankly, for what the coaches do, the work they do. They do all the same work that our soccer coaches and our lacrosse coaches do. Their season is actually quite long because we have a number of runners who go well up to Thanksgiving. It's also, I think, justification for a program that we tout in the community as being sort of a model program that takes on all kids. And we've got top elite runners. We've got kids who are, interested in competing, but are also, within their peers. And we have other kids who are looking for a fun physical activity. So they have come forward more than once. So this isn't their first time coming forward. And we have pushed it back. And my own personal opinion, I felt as though it was time that they were recognized for the value that program brings.
Can I just ask just a clarifying question, John? For your fall sport coaches, what are the other, like the number for them? Do you know off the top of your head?
So in terms of enrollment?
No, I mean like
ratio.
Ratio, yeah.
No.
They're all 5.5.
So every other sport is a 5.5 in the fall?
In the fall.
Okay. And at what point do they get additional assistant coaches in terms of like a student to like an athlete to coach ratio?
So that ratio is set up primarily for track, which has, well over 100. One of the difficulties with cross country is managing, numbers to that extent. So that's something I think that is through the Appendix C is negotiated. There are some floating coaching positions if we have a third team, for example, like if there are enough participants for girls and boys soccer, or basketball, we can bring on another assistant. The coaches at this point, and they do have a third coach who is a volunteer coach.
Okay. So
they actually have a couple. They have 2 volunteer coaches.
So they're not getting additional paid coaches when they get like these hundreds of kids that are able to join?
No, definitely not.
All right. I'm going to invite someone to make the motion, and then we can certainly have any discussion folks want to make as we go along.
So moved.
Michael Jaffe makes the motion.
Can Javi second?
Yeah, so we're making the motion just for clarity for whoever's doing the minutes. We're making a motion to accept the ACID recommendations for the fiscal year 22, which is agenda item 6. And this specific recommendation is asking us to take the cross-country coach role at the current ratio of 4.0 and move it to the ACID recommended ratio of 5.5. That would have an increase for the 2 coaching positions for $4,533.99 in the next fiscal year. Sorry. So Michael has made the motion and has seconded it. Do we have discussion? Michael.
I have a question that I probably should have asked before, but just for purposes of clarification, this is for next fiscal, to begin
Correct.
next
Fiscal
fiscal year,
22.
correct?
This is for fiscal 22.
Okay, and my comment is that I don't so much like doing this out of, it seems like it's not so much out of cycle, because this is something to look at each year, but it's not being done holistically. And I am concerned about a precedent of various elements of what's unique about particular sports being highlighted, and then we don't have consistency in evaluation. That said, it is surprising to hear that the cross-country program that regularly has over 100 runners, I think it's probably the second largest every year, athletic programs, is that the coaches are being compensated at a level that's materially lower than the other sports. So I'd be in support of kind of making the exception to the holistic review.
Thank you. Other comments? Anne and then Lynn.
Just really quickly, to Michael's point about doing sort of out of cycle, I would say that this kind of is really a correction. I was on, as Andrew mentioned, on the MOU a few years back, and at that point, and I won't go into how we discussed it, because I think actually, John, maybe you were you on that too? Yeah. That we definitely talked about cross country long and hard, and I feel that this really is something that perhaps we thought would be adjusted in the future, that was kind of built in, just not necessarily explicitly stated. So it's really more of a correction than out of turn or out of cycle.
I think to Michael's point, the one area that, and this came up in the meeting, that that I think the one group that will be asking the same questions would probably be our other track teams.
Lynn?
And again, another perfect segue into what I was gonna say is as a general matter, when it comes to compensation especially, I think what needs to be presented to us when we're trying to make this decision is all of that context data and comparability data, so that our decision is well informed and justified, so that we can address questions that come down the line about, but why not us? And, why did you do this amount? How did you come to this conclusion? And so it sounds like all of that was there and all of that was discussed. But I think for us to make a decision on it, that information should be presented to us in the materials that come to us.
Thanks, Lynn. Anybody else? Comments? Discussion? For me, I just, in order to just add to the discussion, I feel very ambivalent about this particular decision, because I have great respect for those of you who worked on the ACID, bringing it all in line a number of years ago. I think that was really hard work and good work, and I want to respect the work that folks did. That being said, I thought for some reason that as we got hundreds of kids, that we were also funding additional assistant coaches. So the understanding that these folks are responsible for many, many children running all over the place, and all the work that ordinarily goes into getting them involved in their races and entered, and that's a lot of work. So, that sort of changes my thinking on this, because I am, like you, very reluctant to change ACID ratios that were worked out in a long and arduous process.
We do, just to interject, we do pay assistant coaches for cross country. It's a 2.0 ratio.
We have multiple assistant coaches.
We have volunteers as well, that's all.
Right, but there definitely are paid. I don't have it off the top of my head because it's been a year, but there definitely are paid positions for cross country
Okay,
for
Thanks.
assistant coaches.
right, for one for each team.
I believe that's how it works. Yes.
But it wouldn't be like if 80 kids sign up, there's a coach and assistant coach, and if 120 kids sign up, we add another.
No, we actually have added, because I know when the team got really large, I think they requested, and we did add a position because it becomes a safety thing. They can't manage that many kids. And we do the same thing with track. As track gets bigger, we actually add assistant positions so that there's accurate, good coverage.
Good.
So we do pay those positions. So I didn't want that to be misunderstood.
Don, I'd have to check with Emily, because I know we certainly do for track, but I thought that parents raise money for the cross-country assistance.
Yeah, I'm fairly certain at least one or two. I'm pretty sure we do.
Okay.
Okay. Judy?
It's in the appendix, assistant cross-country coaches.
All right. So with further discussion, I'm going to call a roll call vote. So if you could just unmute yourself. Michael Jaffe?
Michael Jaffe, yes.
Ann Hovey?
Ann Hovey, yes.
Lynn Collins?
Lynn Collins, yes.
Kate Potter?
Kate Potter, yes.
Judy Miller?
Judy Miller, yes.
And Maggie Sharon, yes. Okay, moving forward. I think we are almost to the very end of our agenda. So for those of you who have tuned in because you're excited to come to our next meeting, which will be on a different Zoom channel, we'll get that going momentarily. We just have our consent agenda for the approval of minutes for June 9th, June 24th, September 5th, and October 6th. Can I have a motion to approve those minutes?
Lynn Collins, so moved.
Thank you, Lynn. Do I have a second?
Judy Miller, second.
Thank you. Judy Miller, Lynn Collins made the motion. Judy Miller seconded. I know Mrs. Hovey has stepped off to start the second Zoom meeting. Can you unmute? And we're just going to do a quick roll call. Michael Jaffe?
Michael Jaffe, yes.
Lynn Collins?
Lynn Collins, yes.
Kate Potter?
Kate Potter, yes.
Judy Miller?
Judy Miller, yes.
And Maggie Sharon, yes. So we've approved the consent agenda. Please, for your information only, see the minutes from the September 22nd and September 29th meetings of the Sherborn and Dover School Committees respectively. I invite members who have items for our December 8th meeting, which will be our next regional school committee meeting, to please send them to Judy or to myself at your convenience. And if there are no further comments, questions, or concerns, we're going to adjourn this meeting. Anything? Great. Thank you for joining us here tonight. All of you on the Zoom, please don't forget to vote if you haven't already. And with that, I just need to take a quick roll call to adjourn the meeting. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Lynn Collins, so moved.
Michael
Great.
Jaffe, second.
Thank you. Motion by Lynn, second by Michael Jaffe. Michael Jaffe.
Yes.
Lynn Collins.
Lynn Collins, yes.
Judy Miller.
Judy Miller, yes.
Kate Potter.
Kate Potter, yes.
And Maggie Sharon, yes. With that, we are adjourned. Anyone who's joining us for the joint school committee meeting, that is on a different Zoom channel and you can find it in the posting.